In today's video, we're going to be looking at the Casio Privia PX-S6000. I'm really excited to be doing this review today because I've been using this keyboard now for a long time, something like 8 months. It's actually been my primary at-home playing keyboard. I use it constantly for both practicing and also inputting MIDI into the computer. So I've really gotten to know it quite well, and I'm very much ready to give you my full and honest review of this keyboard. Two really quick disclaimers. Number one is that I am a pianist who uses this primarily as an at-home stationary instrument. I use it for both just turning it on and plugging and playing right through the speakers whenever I want to just sit down and practice or play something, or I will also use it as my primary MIDI keyboard when I'm playing something into the computer. And when I do that, I actually use different sounds than the built-in sounds. That said, I'm going to show you the built-in sounds. I'm going to talk about how good the primary piano sound is. Of course, I'm going to talk about how good the keybed is. How is the action? How does it feel? How good are the other presets on this instrument? Is it useful in terms of the other presets besides the piano? Is this useful as a gigging keyboard as opposed to a stationary at-home keyboard? And overall, would I recommend it? And of course, some other things that I'm going to be throwing into this review as well. The second disclaimer is that I was sent this keyboard free from Casio, but as always, I made it completely clear to them that I was going to give an open and honest review because my primary concern is making sure that I have a trusted relationship with you, the viewer, and I want you to know that you can trust that I'm going to give you my honest opinion when it comes to any gear that I review on this channel. So let's get into it. So now in the intro, you've already heard the primary piano sound that is on this keyboard when you just turn it on. It's called Privia Grand. I'm a fan, I like it. Let me play it for you one more time, give you a few dynamic changes here. It's extremely responsive, and that's really, really important to me when I play an instrument and I check out the sound. Is it really responsive to velocity and touch dynamics? Does it feel like it responds how a real piano would respond? Now, of course, that also ties into the keybed and the physical feeling of playing the keyboard, which I will get into in just a minute. Now, there's another preset that I sometimes use for this main piano sound, and that's going to be the more mellow version. Here's the more bright version of this piano. As a jazz pianist, not something I'm going to find myself using super often, but for specific use cases, this can be really, really helpful. It's something I might use in production, especially if I'm doing some pop piano. I don't know, there's a little idea of how that sounds. But here's the one that I find myself using more often, the Privia Grand Mellow. So this is a gorgeous sound if you couldn't tell. I'm a big fan of this preset. In fact, this is probably the one that I use the most often. But oftentimes I will just turn on the piano and I will just use Privia Grand, just the stock preset that it comes loaded on when you turn the power on of the keyboard. So the sound is lovely, but I want to tell you this. I also got to test out the PX-S6000, which actually comes preloaded with a couple other really beautiful grand pianos. And my favorite preset of any of the Casio Grands was actually loaded on that keyboard, and unfortunately does not come on the 6000. So that's just something to keep in mind if that's really important to you, that you turn on the keyboard and you have the absolute best piano sounds available and different options, you might consider getting the 7000 as opposed to the 6000. However, otherwise the instruments are very, very similar. As far as I'm aware, the same keybeds, they look very, very similar. They're built similarly, and so I wouldn't worry too much between those. Now, me personally, I actually more often than not am using a software piano instrument. So mine of choice right now are Addictive Keys, Piano Tech, and Keyscape. Those are really my three that I find myself opening up quite often for different reasons. Also, a super quick shout out to Imagiro Piano for a great soft piano plugin that I often just pull up. It's really simple and it sounds great instantly. So in a lot of ways for me, the built-in sound is not a primary concern of mine, but if you're not someone who is keeping your keyboard plugged into the computer and working out of a DAW often, it's going to be important to you that you have great piano sound. So of course, listen to the sounds I've been using and you can be the judge subjectively. Are these sounds that sound good to your ear? Would you enjoy hearing these sounds when you play? As long as we're talking top tier sounds in keyboards when it comes to piano sounds, they all sound great. They all respond a bit differently and they may sound a bit different. A different instrument was literally sampled to create them, or the emulation is a bit different. It really just depends. So it is subjective, and that's why I'm going to be playing these sounds throughout so you can actually hear and decide if you like how they sound. But in terms of the feel, obviously it's extremely important to see literally how it feels physically. So let's talk about the keybed here. So first off, there are a few just beautiful touches that may not be the most important thing to everyone, but for me, they do play a major role in just my experience and enjoyment of using this instrument. Those are little things like the tops of the keys actually being textured. There's actually a little wooden grain type texture on top of the keys that you can actually feel when you play the keys and when you move your fingers across the keys. That's nice and it helps you stick a little bit more. It also makes this digital keyboard feel a lot more like the acoustic piano behind me. Obviously, these keys also feel a very similar texture. Now I would say these keys are a bit more deep of a texture, you feel it more, but it's a really nice touch to have the texture on these keys. Subtle, but it's more coarse than just a smooth digital piano key, and I love that. In addition to that texturing, there's actually real wood on the sides of the keys. I believe that wood is spruce, and that is another just really nice touch. Now, does it make a huge difference when I'm literally playing? I doubt it. I doubt that it's something I'm really feeling, but just seeing it there as I play up the keys to the right, it's a really nice touch to see wood and not just more white plastic. It feels more realistic, honestly. It's just one of those small things you don't initially think about, but once you use the instrument a lot, you're like, wow, that's really, really nice. Now, how does the keybed actually feel to play? This is really important discussion, and so I want to give you the best possible description of how this feels, because I think it's really important to understand that keybeds also are subjective, of course. We all grow up playing different types of pianos or keyboards, and we get used to specific touches. Maybe one person loves the feel of a really heavy key touch. Someone else might have grown up with an upright piano and it was really light, and that's what feels the most natural to them. So again, I would say that this keybed is easily amongst my favorites that I've played, but it has a very specific style and feel. So this keybed, I would say, is on the lighter side. I don't feel like I need to put a ton of weight in order to produce sound. That said, it does still feel natural. So if I had to describe this, I would say that it feels very much like either a nice upright or a more light touch baby grand, something like that. In some ways, I actually prefer this because I feel like it's a nice middle ground between a completely light or inaccurate keybed, which really just kind of feels like you're practicing on something that's not going to translate well to a real piano. And then on the other end of the spectrum, a very, very heavy keybed, which I find can actually be physically limiting for me in terms of how long I'm comfortable practicing. So I'm someone who has had some legitimate injuries in my forearms and tendon-related injuries from practicing the piano. There is actually something really nice about just a kind of subtle but important extra added element of stamina that I feel playing on this keybed because it's a bit lighter than some of the other keybeds. A question you might be asking is, oh, well, how does that translate then when you're playing a grand piano with a heavy touch? What I found is that within about 10 minutes of playing that grand piano, I've already forgotten that the touch is really heavy or different. So, I think, again, that depends a lot on preference, but for me, I prefer to be able to sit here and have more physical stamina. So I've really been enjoying this keybed. How loud is the keybed? Well, I'm just going to completely turn off the volume for a second and you'll be able to hear exactly how loud it is in the room. So obviously it's louder when I play forte. This is more piano. And this again is also after probably around 8 months of use or so. So in my opinion, that is actually pretty quiet, very sustainably quiet. The sound has never been something that bothered me when it comes to the Keybed. As soon as I actually turn the speakers on, I completely forget that there is even key sound, especially right now I don't even have the speakers nearly as loud as I might make them when I was fully practicing. I'm keeping it low so that it doesn't bleed too much into the vocal microphone. So overall, the Keybed gets a really great grade from me, but I will give you this disclaimer. If I'm being completely honest with you, I personally think that you should try the Keybed if at all possible before purchasing an instrument. So great news about a Casio is that most large keyboard stores are going to be carrying this keyboard. So you can actually just go, try it out, compare it to some other Keybeds and see how it feels. All right, next up is a category that not everyone's gonna care about, but I definitely do, and that is just the aesthetic look of the keyboard. I'm a huge fan of the touches that they have done to make this just a beautiful instrument to look at. Looks great in your home, looks great when you're sitting to play it, and it even looks great on video. If you couldn't tell, one thing that's really cool about this is that I've actually had the stand set up. Now, most keyboards, when I have that set up, it just looks awful in a video. But this one, they made the beautiful touch of having it be clear. I absolutely love that idea and that touch. It actually makes a big difference to me. In addition to that, I love the modern, sleek, minimalist design. There are no buttons, just the one volume knob, and everything else is just touch. And it's really, really cool. It makes it kind of feel like I'm using an iPad or something like that whenever I'm messing around with the keyboard. And there's something very modern and clean about that feeling for the interface. They did, however, give you a couple knobs over on the left side and a pitch bend wheel, which to me almost visually, it's very skinny, so it doesn't look like it necessarily be super high quality, but it's got some really nice responsive weight to it. And I would say it's a very nice quality pitch bend wheel if that's important to you. You'll also notice some wood style paneling in the front of the keyboard, which is really pretty, and on the sides, which makes it look great in my opinion. And I also love the stand design. Again, for being at home, it's just a beautiful looking instrument. Visually, they really nailed it. Even choosing to put this gray mesh in front of the speakers in front, I just think they really nailed this instrument in terms of the visual design. Now, is that important to everyone? Of course not. I totally understand that you would prioritize other things over it. But for me, I find that the aesthetic beauty of kind of any technology that I use really does affect my ability to enjoy using it. It's almost like whether your room is clean or cluttered. It's not important to everyone, but for me, working in a clean room just frees my brain. It almost frees up some space for other things. The same thing is true of a phone or an instrument or my computer desktop. If there is space, it gives me this sensation of space mentally as well, and that's really helpful. So I'm not gonna say it's the single most important thing, but I really appreciate a nice visual design. Next up, I wanna actually talk about the presets in this instrument because there are other categories besides just the grand piano. So let's take a look at how some of these sounds and talk about those. So you are gonna find some additional acoustic piano settings and presets. They're gonna give you different senses of space, different tones for the instruments. That's the stage piano. Here's the ballad piano. This one feels a bit further away maybe. And I'm not gonna go through every one of these because personally, I don't actually use them very often, if at all. And I don't know if you will, but I'm sure there are probably other videos that can walk you through the different presets in the Casio piano. So let's take a quick look at some of the electric piano sounds. This is Storm Rider. Obviously a nice tremolo thing going here. I actually really love this one, Where It Is. Now, are these my favorite electric piano sounds? No, they are not. I mean, I have so many incredible software emulations of Rhodes and many other electric pianos. All of the software instruments I mentioned before, Addictive Keys, Keyscape, Pianotech, they all have their own electric piano emulations. And I do think that not only do they give you more customizability, but they do beat these. So these electric piano presets, not my favorite in the world. I do think that if these types of presets are really important to you, you may find better ones elsewhere. Let's look at a few others. Here's Super Clavy. There's a Wah Clavy, which I like a lot as well. So a couple pretty decent clav sounds in here. We've got some harpsichord sounds. I'll be honest, I don't use harpsichord very often. We've got vibraphone. Got marimba. Celesta. It's a nice celesta sound. Glockenspiel. And finally, I'll show you the jazz organ. So I'm not going to go through all the presets on here. What I would say is, for someone who's really interested in a keyboard that they can take on a gig and use any great synth or clav or electric piano sound, etc., this is not the keyboard for you. There are other keyboards with a primary design focus on giving you a completely separate synth module and an electric piano module, even an organ module, or some kind of a really complex digital system with incredible sample emulations that are customizable, etc., etc. For me, this keyboard has been an at-home keyboard. I don't need any of these sounds because those sounds for me are in the computer. But you are going to get some synths, some strings, all sorts of different Casio stock sounds are in here, and a lot of them are decent. You can also create splits in the keyboard, so you can use one sound lower, one sound higher, etc. You can also do layering, so you can layer two sounds at once to make them sound different. So there are some options that you can do, but in my opinion, they're still somewhat basic. If I wanted a keyboard that was going to be used very often as a synthesizer, I would not be choosing this keyboard. However, for a keyboard where my primary concern is just the grand piano, this is wonderful. And honestly, I could see myself using it on gigs too. It's beautiful and sleek. I would just basically keep these legs removed and I would keep it on a collapsible stand of some sort, and then I would just throw it in my car. It's not super heavy, which is really nice. So at the end of the day, I would not recommend purchasing this keyboard for its presets. However, if your primary concern is having a nice feeling piano that looks great and sounds great, then this is a great option. And the other sounds are fun to play around with or use at the occasional gig that calls for a different sound. Now, here is the pedal module for this keyboard. It's nice. It gives you 3 different options. I definitely dig it. I've gotten very used to it, don't have any issues with it, other than the fact that I wish the pedals were a bit longer. They're a bit short, but again, I've gotten very used to it and I don't even notice it anymore. However, I will tell you that on the 7000, they actually did solve that issue, so the pedals it comes with are actually longer. Now, of course, a really important thing to discuss here is price. How much is this keyboard? Well, I've seen it very often online in the $1,500 to $1,600 range new. Used, I've seen it around the 1,000, below or a bit above 1,000 as well. It can really fluctuate. But considering everything you're actually getting and the beauty of this instrument, the quality of the keybed, how lovely it looks, the quality of the piano sound itself, I actually think it's a very fairly priced instrument. Now the 7000, you're getting into the $2,500 range. So for me personally, since I'm actually mainly using this as a stationary at-home keyboard with MIDI sounds in my DAW, that extra $1,000 or so wouldn't really be worth it for me, because I still think that the 6000 is gorgeous and looks wonderful in my home. And it really does everything I could ever want it to do or need it to do in terms of being a beautiful MIDI / quick turn on to practice keyboard. However, if I was going to be gigging pretty frequently with the keyboard, or if I wanted that really interesting and beautiful mustard yellow that the 7000 offers, which I do kind of love that color, it's just so unique, then I really might consider opting to spend the extra money for the 7000. So let's do a quick speaker test. So you're actually hearing this through the microphone that's picking up my voice as well. The speakers get nice and loud, so I have to say they're pretty decent speakers, and there are a few different settings you can use depending on where the keyboard's placed in the room. You might choose one setting if it's in the middle of the room and a different one if it's against the wall. They actually change the way the sound comes out of the piano to make it sound better to you in those specific situations. So at the end of the day, I love this keyboard as an option for a pianist who is mainly going to be concerned about playing the piano, i.e. acoustic grand piano sounds. If the vast majority of your gigs are, again, grand piano and you want to run out of this keyboard, I can definitely recommend it. If you want to keep this at home and practice the piano, also can very highly recommend it. It's gorgeous as well, so it looks nice in your home. If anything, it actually adds visually to your home. Who I would not recommend this to is the pianist who wants to have tons of synth sounds built in and other emulated instruments built into the piano. I think there are other options that I would lean towards for that pianist. However, for a just gorgeously put together keyboard that has the feel of a real piano and a lot of little beautiful touches to make it feel more special to play and emulate an acoustic piano more, I can definitely highly recommend this. As silly as it sounds, even just little things like the clear music stand is really nice, because when I'm not actually putting music up, it's nice to just kind of forget that it's there. Whereas if it is not clear, it can be a real eyesore, even for you as you're practicing and playing, and especially if you're actually using it to make YouTube videos. Really quick, if you are getting something useful out of this video and you're not a subscriber, please click the subscribe button. I promise to keep great, useful, valuable content flowing your way. And also, if you've learned something helpful, please hit that like button. It really, really helps me out. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope that this review has been really helpful to you. If there's anything I missed or any questions you have, please let me know in the comments. Or if you'd like any more detailed description of certain features, let me know in the comments. Again, in this review, I am primarily coming from the perspective of a professional pianist who uses this keyboard at home as a stationary instrument, but I definitely could see myself taking it out on gigs as well. These days though, I prioritize complete, utter portability, which is why if you are interested in checking out the most portable keyboard solution on the market, so portable that you can put it in your backpack and even take it on a plane with you and still have 88 keys, then be sure to check out this video that's going on screen right now. Overall, I'm a huge fan. I'm excited to keep on using this keyboard and having it in many of my videos whenever possible because it looks and feels great. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.